Oh me, oh my. Version 4.3 for Genshin was announced today. Well, yeah, yesterday from your perspective. But anyways, it was announced today, and I am very excited for version 4.3 on Polearms Only. It's probably the most important patch for this account, maybe that has ever happened, but the stuff I'm going to talk about in this video I think does have relevance for other accounts, but we'll get into that. Now, there's a couple of reasons I'm excited. One reason is, of course, because the Almighty Shogun is rerunning, and that's important because we have C0 Raiden Shogun. That means we can get C2. That's good, but that's actually secondary. C2 Raiden is going to be really fun on this account, but, and I got plans for a video, so don't you worry, but there's another character. That, of course, is good old Chevreuse, who I'm probably pronouncing the name wrong for, so I'm just going to call her Chevy. And I can tell you one thing for sure, when we first learned that Chevreuse was going to be a Pyro Polearm, I was just kind of like, great, you know, that's what Polearms Only needs. Another Pyro Polearm character, right? But it turns out that initial reaction was very, very preemptive, I suppose, because Chevreuse is going to be really, really good. Well, okay, I shouldn't say she's going to be really good. I think she's going to be really, really good and very impactful for this account because she's going to enable a lot of teams and characters to be relevant in ways that they weren't before. And that's kind of what I'm going to be discussing. Oh, and by the way, I am going to be doing some wishing in this video, but that's going to be towards the end of the video, so you can stick around for that. By the way, normally I would not make videos like this about, you know, talking about a character before they're released because I'd rather, you know, have them in practice and like show you how they perform. And I will make videos on that for Chevreuse, but I've got enough that I'm excited about that I just felt like I wanted to share it with anyone. And I also think my excitement for Chevy is relevant to you on your account too. Because basically I have a lot of ideas about how to use Chevreuse. And I have a lot of ideas on how to use Chevreuse on an account that has only polearm characters. If you are on an account that does not have the restriction to only use polearm characters, you can do more things with Chevreuse than I can. Now, mind you, I will be getting C6 Chevreuse. Well, that's the plan at least. Technically, this is not enough Primo Gems to guarantee Chevreuse because 4 stars suck to acquire, and it's possible it might literally take 20 billion. Anyhow, I'm already distracting myself. The point is, Chevreuse has the potential to be relevant for your account too. I don't know exactly how relevant, because that's going to depend on like the state in your account and like what you like to do in Genshin and blah, 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 blah. For me, I'm very excited for her, so I'm just going to talk about why. And maybe you'll be interested in her too, or maybe not. It doesn't matter. Because only I matter. The main thing that Chevreuse does that makes her relevant is that she makes overload teams, which really weren't a thing before. Like, you could use overload early game, right? And it's fine. But overload teams weren't really a thing before, and now she makes those supposed overload, like, if you were just, like, gonna draw on paper, hey, I want to make an overload Hu Tao. It's, like, not really a real thing, but now it is much more of a real thing with Chevreuse. And is that better than doing other things with Hu Tao? Probably, maybe. Or whatever other Electro and Pyro units? Probably, maybe. But also maybe not. And that's kind of what I'm going to be discussing here. So you can try to understand why I like Chevreuse so much. I should say Chevy, because I feel like people are going to be like, you say, it's Chevreuse. And I'm going to be like, I don't care. It's Chevy. So I got to get used to calling it Chevy, and then no one can complain about pronouncing it wrong. Anyhow, I'm not going to go like super in-depth to Chevreuse's kit itself. You can find, you know, other people that have talked about that or will be talking about that in the future. But a real quick overview, which this is basically the same stuff Hoyoverse revealed on stream, is basically Chevreuse does a little bit of damage of her own and heals a little bit with her skill and has an attack buffing passive, and then most importantly has a second passive that shreds Electro and Pyro resistance by 40% whenever you trigger Overload on a character. And 40%, for those that might not be aware, is the same amount as the Viridescent Veer Never debuff does. Oh, and in case anyone didn't know, Overload, you see that has a different number from Pyro damage. You see a different number here, right? You see like the weird tinted reddish and then the normal Pyro red. Those are different damage colors, but Overload damage does count as Pyro damage, so that means Chevreuse does buff Overload damage by nature of reducing Pyro resistance. For Chevreuse to give you that 40% shred, you do have to have a party completely of Pyro and Electro party members. So Zhongli here would not function. I'd have to swap Zhongli for, you know, Toma or something in a team like this one. Interestingly, in the 4.3 live stream, they did show Chevreuse's burst actually has a bit of grouping on it. And that is interesting, and funnily enough, it's technically kind of the first grouper that Polearms Only has. which I find funny on the Overload character. Overload is normally an anti-grouping thing, and the first real grouping ability on Polearms Only is an Overload character. Amusing. Chevy's notable constellations would be her C4 and C6 in my opinion, as C6 of course can buff your active characters' pyro-electro damage by up to 60%, which is a lot. Chevy's C4 is also interesting. It basically just gives her extra skill uses after you use her burst, which also might result in extra ability to heal. So more damage and more healing from her C4, and her C4 potentially makes her C6 build up stacks of damage bonus faster, assuming that she gets up multiple stacks of her healing that comes from when you use her skill, but I don't know for sure if that actually happens because we haven't actually seen clarification if it does. For Polearms Only, we certainly should be able to get C6. It's probably mostly just a question of what Raiden constellation do we end up with by the point of getting C6 Chevreuse. I'm just going to consider it a dub that we have a character with relevant constellations at all when paired with Chevreuse, because if Chevreuse had been paired with Navia, I probably would have had to pull for Navia. Well, not pull for Navia. That's the wrong way to phrase it. But I would have had to pull for Chevreuse on Navia's banner and would have wound up with probably 80 Navias. Oh, by the way, random aside, Navia's weapon is absolutely not a claymore. Is quite literally a halberd. And a halberd is a polearm. Which means, theoretically, if I got Navia's weapon and Navia would be a polearm user. So clearly that means I'm allowed to get Navia on Polearms Only, right? Right? No, I'm joking, because, you know, if I'm allowed to get Navia on Polearms Only with her stupid polearm weapon, then that would mean Raiden, when she's using, you know, a sword in her burst, doesn't count as a polearm user. And I don't want to ban Raiden. That would be unfortunate. Anywho, I'm distracting myself. So, the number one thing that I think Chevreuse will do for Polearms Only, and I think this is something that Chevreuse will be relevant for on other accounts too, like normal accounts, even without Constellation 6 potentially, but it remains to be seen. I'll have to like play with it in practice to try to actually give a real verdict on it. But Chevreuse with Cyno, I think, can actually fix a big part of Cyno's issues. Specifically issues that he has on Polearms Only, to be clear. But on normal accounts, being that, you know, you have better teammate options for Cyno that I don't have, you will at least have an additional team option that didn't really exist before without Chevreuse. So I'm going to try to demonstrate the main problem with Cyno here. So we'll use Yao Yao. And we use Yao Yao, of course, because she's Dendo, right? So I can get Aggravate, and I can do Cyno things. And I do have 4-piece Thundering Fury on Cyno, so that's why I would want to do extra skills outside of when the little eye pops up. I'm like, hey, look at that, decent uptime on Aggravates, right? Except, well, he went invisible. Except usually I ended up running out of Aggravates, but the main issue comes when we're in like anything that's not just boss-based content. Yao Yao starts to target, you know, random enemies, and in general just doesn't have the application from just her skill that's needed to keep up quicken on most enemies. So Cyno ends up having an issue where we just don't have Aggravate going most of the time. And then the other issue is that Cyno normally wants some kind of protecting unit and on like a shielding unit for interruption resistance, right? So it can of course feel bad if you get interrupted when you're doing Cyno's burst. So you want a protective unit, and you know, Toma is fine for that, but then Toma with Yao Yao is going to end up creating a burning aura, right? So then that's bad. So okay, you can put Zhongli and Yao Yao together, right? That's fine, and it technically is, which is basically to say that Yao Yao and Cyno are already bad teammates. So Cyno doesn't really work super well on Polearms Only, and that's despite the fact that I have C2. So I could go more in depth on like the problems Cyno has in Polearms Only, but basically he's only ever really been useful just by nature of being another Electro unit that I sometimes need to deal with, you know, mechanics in the Abyss, like with this Dorito boss. Chevreuse can potentially fix Cyno for a couple reasons. one, 40% electro resistance reduction is significant, and two, I have pyro party members that can apply enough pyro off field to allow Cyno to consistently get a lot of overloads. He already has a kit that incentivizes building EM, which means, substantially increased overload damage. And Chevreuse's passive that gives the resistance reduction doesn't require, any activation of Chevreuse's abilities. So that 40% electro resistance reduction, as long as you're triggering overloads, is going to be up through the full duration of Cyno's burst. Because the big problem Cyno has is that his burst duration is 10 seconds at a baseline, but then it extends to, I believe, something like 18 seconds, and then hit lag can extend it, past actually the cooldown. So Cyno can have 20-second plus burst duration times, and that's what makes him a problematic teammate to use, and usually you have to, end his burst early. And we'd still probably have to end his burst early to, restart Xiangling and whatever. But it wouldn't have the same issues it has with Yao Yao, because Xiangling has a fairly long burst, Toma has a decently long burst, and then Chevreuse doesn't really have much for off-field. You just, use her abilities while she's on-field for a bit, and then switch to your other units, right? So, the point is the electro damage bonus and the from Chevreuse's C6, as well as the resistance reduction from Chevreuse, both compound with Cyno's kit really well. On paper, I genuinely think that Chevreuse with Cyno, doing Cyno, Xiangling, Toma is probably just better as a generic protective unit, and if you build Toma for burst damage, on 4P's emblem, not whatever EM build he's on, he can actually do a not insignificant amount of damage. Although I'd really want more Toma Constellations to help me out with some aspects of Toma's stuff if I want to build him for damage, particularly as C4, but maybe that'll happen eventually. Maybe he'll be on Raiden's banner, who knows? So anyways, you get the point. Hopefully, Overload Cyno is already a thing that can work, but Chevreuse is going to take Overload Cyno from being a thing that can work to a thing that's actually potentially good to do, and might actually work better and solve some of Cyno's problems better than, any other team could solve his problems, at least on this account, right? So, I don't know. I look forward to it. I truly believe Cyno might get a new breath of life in Polearms Only, and honestly on mini accounts. Don't kill me. And that's all thanks to Chevreuse, and that's awesome. With that said, Chevreuse is also useful for carry Raiden. Carry Raiden is not really a thing on Polearms Only, outside of my goofy hybrid team you might have seen from my recent Polearms Only video. So the things I mentioned, with the damage bonus and blah 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 blah, blah all with Cyno, apply to Raiden to an extent as well. The exact extent to which that's relevant, I don't know. I don't know how often I'm going to be inclined to do a carry Raiden, It might be really good, it might not be very good, I don't know. I think Cyno, because of his tendency, to be moving around in general towards enemies as you're doing, normal attacks, you can see he has a little bit of movement that jumps him forward. I think, the overload issue of, knockback happening will be less of an issue with Cyno, whereas Raiden has a little bit more problems that potentially would happen from, your slimes getting knocked back 10 miles. But carry Raiden is certainly something I'm going to try, especially because I'm a goofball and I have a very, very weird hybrid Raiden build that is using 4P's emblem with EM. A weird overload Raiden is a thing that wasn't really something I would do before, but now might actually be doable thanks to just, Chevreuse buffing the electric damage a whole bunch. And yeah, we'll see how that goes. Oh, one thing I just realized I probably should have mentioned before. So usually people consider overload in general, bad. And that's fair because when you're trying to clear content as fast as possible, it can be annoying. Using overload as a grouping ability is just something you have to be smart with, right? So if I want this dude to be knocked toward this lady, I gotta make sure I stand here and knock them that way, right? And that's kind of all it comes down to. Alrighty, there is one last team I gotta talk about in the context of Polearms Only and Chevreuse, and that is Hu Tao. So Hu Tao is in a kind of weird situation where I don't think Chevreuse is going to be that insane for her. But there is some things that I could do that C6 Chevreuse in particular, without C6 Chevreuse I really don't think this is a thing at all. But C6 Chevreuse in particular, from the calcs I did, C6 Chevreuse can actually result in Hu Tao getting around a 10% average damage increase. Maybe more depending on how relevant the fact that I currently use, you know, the 4-piece Shimenawas, which means I can't burst every single rotation. And Chevreuse would mean I can switch to different artifacts and therefore burst every rotation, which bursting every rotation on Hu Tao could be quite strong. So the Hu Tao Chevreuse team would be this team right here with Hu Tao, Xiangling. Raiden would have to be in the team for some amount of overloads, right? She'd be an E-bot doing overloads. It is possible that Raiden might actually be able to get some meaningful value from bursting occasionally to, you know, refund energy on Xiangling or whatever. So for comparison, here is my normal mono Pyro Hu Tao team. So of course Zhongli is here for protection and resistance shred and a little bit of damage buffing. And then Xiangling is doing Xiangling things. Xiao is on VV duty and he has Fab for extra energy for mostly Xiangling. And then Hu Tao does charge attack things. This team is, in my experience, the strongest single target damaging team I can have in this account. Against bosses, this team is able to take down bosses really, really fast. So, you know, you can see I didn't even swirl VV properly there. Actually, whoops, I screwed up. I think I did swirling. I either didn't swirl or I just did it too fast. But I just killed that boss very fast, right? Without even swirling properly, because I would have gotten, I believe, around 50,000 damage if I had done that properly. That's 50,000 from Hu Tao's charge attack specifically. So you're probably wondering, okay, how the heck can Chevreuse be, you know, a damage upgrade for this team? So for one reason, it's because Xiao is just here as a VV swirler, right? So Chevreuse would provide the same elemental resistance reduction. And then, of course, with C6, Chevreuse would provide 60% pyro damage bonus, and Chevreuse would provide more damage contribution herself than Xiao does in this team. Sadly, Xiao provides very little damage to this team. Sometimes he hits 15,000 damage on a skill. Woo-hoo. And you might say that, you know, Chevreuse being a healer is an anti-synergy with Hu Tao, right? Because, oh, she wants to be under 50% HP to get this 33% pyro damage bonus. But if you have C6 Chevreuse, she gives 60% pyro damage bonus. And 60% pyro damage bonus is greater than 33%, therefore being over 50% HP isn't really a problem. What is slightly more of a problem, though, is also the fact that if you're over 50% HP, you lose the passive, the second part of the passive from Staff of Homa, which on my Hu Tao with 34,000 HP, that's about a 340 attack loss. So she goes from, you know, 2,000 attack here to 1,600 and something attack at a baseline, which is quite a lot. But 60% pyro damage bonus is more than enough to make up for the loss of the second part of Staff of Homa's passive and this passive here. But it's not to a crazy degree that I would consider like super worthwhile to purposely use Chevreuse, particularly because without Zhongli, right, you have to worry about getting hit more theoretically. The missing piece of the puzzle with Hu Tao and Chevreuse is the fact that since Chevreuse heals on her skill, and there's an artifact set that the 2-piece buffs charge attack damage, and the 4-piece gives 36% crit rate. It's good old Marsh Sussy Hunters. Chevreuse should enable on Polearms Only to be able to keep Marsh Sussy Hunters on her active, like almost full uptime from the napkin math I did. And that is really interesting, because then I could do something like this Hu Tao build where I could have like 90, if it was the same level of investment as my Shimenawa artifacts are, I could get to like 90% plus crit rate and towards 300 crit damage, and that, compounded with the fact that I'd be able to use Hu Tao's burst a whole lot more, would result in a 10% plus average damage increase. And 10% in damage terms for Genshin, if you're not like very familiar, is quite a lot. And notably, that's a 10% damage upgrade, remember, to the team that I mentioned is the strongest single target team I have on Polearms Only. That's ridiculous. I don't think I would necessarily recommend Chevreuse with Hu Tao on a normal account, because, you know, a normal account can do vape Hu Tao. But if you really like Hu Tao and you're, you know, want to play, you know, Hu Tao in a different way, Overload Hu Tao with good old Chevreuse is interesting in my opinion conceptually, especially if you have, you know, Official instead of Raiden. I think that's basically all the teams and the thoughts that I have, the basic thoughts that I have for what Chevreuse can do on this account. And yes, a lot of those thoughts are kind of specific to C6 Chevreuse, but not all of them. And I don't know. I think Chevreuse is going to be super interesting, and I think she's going to be the most impactful character for this account that I maybe have ever gotten. Actually, that's probably a little bit of an overstatement, because Yao Yao and Candace are the main characters that like enabled me to 36-star Abyss because Hyperbloom is strong. But Chevreuse, being a random new 4-star that they're releasing that conceptually enables me to have a stronger version of one of the strongest teams I have on the account, enables me to have, you know, Cyno become potentially actually relevant on this account when he wasn't before, even with C2. And among other things, like I don't know. I'm super excited for Chevreuse, and I don't know. Let me know if you're excited for Chevreuse or Navia, and of course subscribe if you want to actually, you know, see me test Chevreuse in the actual game rather than just rambling about her to you for 29 years straight. But anyways, I really hope Chevreuse is as good as I'm kind of thinking she will be. She might end up feeling more clunky in practice. We'll see. So last thing we gotta do. I said I was gonna do some wishes. The reason I am wishing is because you see this beautiful weapon right here? Fav Lance? Fav Lance is the most important weapon on Polearms Only. I did the same thing with Staff of Homa. I want more Fav Lances. My goal is I want a second R3 Fav Lance. I do already have Staff of Scarlet Sands, and with Chevreuse coming out, I'm almost assuredly going to want to do Staff of Scarlet Sands on Cyno, right? Duh. And I also can conceive of like wanting to run Staff of Scarlet Sands on other characters. Am I going to go to, you know, 200 wishes in to get a second copy? No. I don't need it. I don't need a second copy damn badly. But I do have, you know, a couple wishes on this account right now. We have 307. So I'm good to spend like to 1 pity is kind of my thinking here. I should be completely safe, probably. Although 4-stars suck to acquire, so maybe I'll regret this. But I'm pretty sure it's relatively safe to do, as long as Cloud Retainer doesn't end up being a polearm or something. Then I might very much regret this. But I want more favs. That's my justification. Here's your wishing content to end off the video. What do we have for pity? 3. Fantastic. Oh, by the way, it's been so long since we wished on a character banner in Polearms Only, you know, that we have no record. I don't even know what our pity is. I know we have a guarantee, though. Anyways, wishing content. We want all the fabs. Fab, please. Whee. Hello, my... Okay, if you're going to ask me the number one thing I did not expect to happen in this video, it would be that. That is actually C6 Mika, which the reason I have a guarantee, funnily enough, the guarantee I just mentioned, is because I was wishing for C6 Mika. Ew, I don't want that game. Now, Mika is probably the most useless character on this account, I'll be honest. But C6 is kind of interesting, so I don't know. Let me know in the comments if you want to see me make a video on C6 Mika in this account. I could do some physical Zhongli shenanigans, maybe. Anyways, that was a surprise. I would have rather honestly had like Toma Constellations or something. But you know what? I'm not gonna complain. That C6 Mika means I never... Screw you! C6 Mika means I never have to wish for on a banner with Mika ever again. Wrong fav. There's like 800 favs in this banner, so that's going to happen a lot potentially. Okay, this is not great so far. We've gotten, I was going to say 4 5-stars. Or 4 5-stars. We've gotten 5 4-stars and all the wrong favs. I really would like at least 2 favs, because 2 favs would be a second R3 fav. That's my goal. The game is going to deign to not give me the one weapon I want. Give me Fav Lance. Okay, well, I am smelling on the horizon a useless blue stick. Let me tell you, if we get Haran and 0 favs, I'm going to be a sad boy, because this... Stop! This is going to be throwing 60 wishes basically in the toilet if we get 0 fabs and no staff. If we get staff and 0 fabs, I guess I'm fine with that. Hey, there's a fab. Let's go. Thank you, game. I appreciate it. Only well, 50 wishes for fav. That's worth. Absolutely worth. Alright, we gotta get a 5-star for the funsies. I think the next poll will probably be pity. Probably. And we're gonna get our second Fav Lance right here now. Game, I'm gonna be a little annoyed with you if you only give me 1 Fav, but it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. There's no 5-star in this poll. That's annoying. I'm pretty sure I didn't need Chong Yun. I am pretty sure we're at like exactly pity, I guess. I guess that makes sense, because soft pity for weapon banner, if you didn't know, starts at 63, and we're going to get a Fab Lance. Stop! Okay, it's fine. It's fine, it's fine. And for funsies... Wait, how many wishes do we have left? I was going to say I was going to do a 10 pull, but yeah, 272 plus the wishes we're going to get next patch, and it'll be fine. It'll be fine. We're still going to have 300 wishes for C6 Chevreuse and C2 Raiden summons. It should be zero problem getting that, probably. Although, I mean, hopefully. Hopefully. We'll see. I won't know until like a month from now. Surely the game won't let me down. It'll give me a staff of Scarlet Sands? Please? Okay. Okay. Is there a 5-star? Ooh, that's one of the best weapons ever. Sarcasm. All right. So, anyways, I'm gonna save that guarantee in case anyone's not aware. There is a guarantee system that carries over on the weapon banner. If you get a standard banner weapon, then your next 5-star on weapon banner is guaranteed not to be the one you want, but it's guaranteed to be one of the 2 5-star weapons. Right? As much as I would like to continue, I think it's smarter to save the guarantee. So we're just gonna hold off. That didn't go as I was dreaming for, but you know, it's fine. Wait, we got C6 Mika. You know what? No, getting C6 Mika is a dub. It was worth it. It was worth it. Total remaining funds for Raiden and Chevreuse, 262. Plus, I gotta save a little bit of Star Glitter, but plus about 20 wishes in Star Glitter, and then plus whatever we get from the next patch. So yeah, we're still gonna have 300 or more wishes for the future. So we're fine. We're fine.